Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Hard Money Talks podcast. I'm Lauren from laurengroupman.com, and I'm here with another wonderful talk specifically about the early warning signs of domestic violence. I have brought on one of the top experts in domestic violence, and also she deals with preventative services and how to prevent people from knowing what financial abuse looks like in domestic violence relationships. Now, I've had somebody on talking about her experience with her own domestic violence relationship as a personal finance expert. But this episode is a little bit different because we're going to be talking about the warning signs of what it looks like to be entering into a domestic violence relationship so that you can protect yourself from actually getting into a marriage where you are financially abused. And so this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. A lot of these warning signs were ones that I saw in my own relationship before entering into the marriage union, which I wish I had noticed and seen as financial abuse before getting married. And I think that that is a common problem with people as they're entering into a marriage union, is that they don't see these early warning signs as things that are going to lead into something more serious once an actual legal union of a marriage happens. So I brought on Kellye to talk about this very specific problem. What are the early warning signs of financial abuse? What are the things you can do to protect yourself? And how does she help people once they're going through the divorce process or breakup process of somebody that is narcissistic or somebody who has been through financial abuse, through a domestic violence relationship? How does she help them get back on their feet? So I think that this episode is so important. This is important for anybody. If you are a parent, to teach your children these things. My kids, I have open discussions with this now. It's like, even me as a financial professional who didn't really pay attention to financial abuse and all of that, like, there are certain things that are common characteristics of people that are narcissists and people that are abusers that do time and time and time again. They are the same exact things. They are clockwork. They do the same things over and over and over again. And if you can spot these early on in a relationship, you're going to have a much better way to get out before you get in too deep. So this interview is going to be awesome. I just know that you're going to absolutely love it. So let's go and meet with Kellye. All right, Kellye, thanks for being on the show today. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that we're talking about this topic. It's like something that's so near and dear to my heart. So I'm glad you took the time to be here.
Well, thanks for having me on, Lauren. I am very excited to have this conversation.
Yeah. So
kicking it right off.
Yeah. Like, so we were talking before, we hit the record button about, I had somebody else on the show before where we talked about, she was a financial advisor. She'd escaped a domestic violence relationship, which had a lot of financial abuse. So we've talked about this before. I've talked about my personal story before. Why are we talking about it again? Because it's a huge topic, especially with the Maid show on Netflix. I think that people are starting to become more aware of this topic. So I want to talk about it like over and over and over again, because it's something that even me, like as a financial professional, I fell into this kind of relationship, not even like recognizing that it was happening to me, And so I wanted to bring you on because you have like a different spin on it, more of a prevention spin. So I wanted to bring you on to talk about what you do and how you can help women, having these hard money conversations. So let's start with like what you do, like what you think, we're talking about financial abuse, domestic abuse, how that affects your money, how that affects your psyche moving forward and all of that. So we're just going to dive right in.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, a little bit, I started my company, the Diamond Arrow Group, I think 4 years ago now, and really kind of burned the ships, went full on right at the middle of 2019. We all know what happened in 2020. So I've had to pivot a little bit, but it's also opened opportunities to connect with more people. The biggest thing that I think really tipped the scale for me, besides watching Maid on Netflix, was seeing the statistic, and I'll read it. Economic abuse is one of the most used tactics to maintain power and control over victims and occurs in 99% of cases of relationship abuse. First of all, my sarcasm went, why don't we just say 100%? Because I doubt there's only one. But what I kept finding as I've been on my journey is that financial abuse is across the board. It doesn't matter what type of relationship you're in. It doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is. It happens in high net worth individuals and it happens in low net worth individuals. Mm-hmm. And to your point that you just made is I didn't see it. And I am in this industry because similar to a physical domestic abuse situation, that violence doesn't start with blows. It doesn't start at the worst end of the spectrum. It starts with tiny little control tactics. It's boundary testing by that partner. Well, how much will they let me keep control? How much will they back down if I push, if I continue to push? So if it starts with, yes, you can have a job outside the home. And then pretty soon it's like, well, I make more money. So it's actually easier if you just stay home.
Stay home and take care of the kids, or stay home and take care of all the other things. Yep.
Right. And I want to be clear with your listeners. If you choose and say, yes, that is the best decision we're making as a family, I do want to stay home, raise my kids. That's phenomenal. And that's awesome. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. The premise is this also what you want to do, or are you being coerced into doing it?
Right.
That's a big differentiator.
Let's backtrack a little bit. So are you a survivor of domestic violence then?
So here's an interesting thing is I wrote a book and it's in the process of going through all the stages. And I will be completely honest that I did not realize some of the behaviors that I experienced over 20 years ago. I got married way too young. And at the time, because of my worldview, lack of knowledge on different signs and behaviors, I just simply thought that I made a big mistake, got married too young, and I'm out. And then paid the societal, oh my goodness, divorce is not accepted in your religion. It's not accepted in your community. You're a horrible person. It's all my fault, all of this. And I just lived with that shame. And only through the knowledge I've gained by doing the work I'm doing and writing my book, all of a sudden, all of these, wait a minute, that's, future forecasting, or I forget what it is, future promising, where they'll tell you, hey, if I promise in the future, I'll do X, Y, Z, but I need you to do this right now. So it's very hard because you're like, okay, well, I'm going to give him what he wants or my partner what they want right now, in hopes that they fulfill their end of the promise. And it's never, no, it never happens. Future faking. That's what I was thinking. And what it ended up being, and ironically, we're talking about this, is I was a very driven person. I knew I didn't want to ever be a stay-at-home mom. I wanted to have my career. I wanted to travel, do all these things. And we had actually broken off our engagement. I had broken off the engagement once because once I started, after the newness wears off and maybe, the engagement, yay, everyone's so happy for you. I was like, wait a minute, the way he's talking now that he thinks I'm almost in this committed relationship is not what I want, and broke off the engagement. And then what happened is that future faking and, oh, no, I've changed. I see it. Yep. You can have a career. You can, go out, we'll travel. We won't have kids right away. Ended up getting back together, got married. And literally a month after we were married, we got into an argument and he said, and I don't even remember what the argument was about. It was probably nothing major. But he just said, well, I never loved you anyway. I only married you so you'd never leave me again. And I was like, whoa, what? Whoa, this is a month. And we've gone through all of this. I faced so much criticism when I broke off the engagement because, oh, he's so nice and he's so stable and he's so whatever, fill in the blank. And we went through counseling and it was very much behind closed doors. And in the counselor's office, he was very much like, well, I'm never getting divorced. So, and I'm just going to bide my time till we have kids and then you can stay home. And it was very much feeling of entrapment. And when I stood up and finally with my Spitfire, personality was said, no, this is not okay. but I didn't have the words to articulate those controlling behaviors. And so instead it looked like I was flippant. I didn't give it enough time. I didn't put the work in, that it was my fault. And I had this big shame on me. And like I said, at the time, I couldn't see it from that lens. There wasn't somebody outside with the knowledge of what a controlling relationship looks like. Yes, he had never hit me. Yes, there was no financial abuse, but there was those controlling behaviors that were starting to show up that were patterns that told me this is not a good, healthy relationship. And I made the decision to leave. And so to your point, I want to keep talking about these things, these early warning signs to prevent. And I want to erase that stigma of people doubting a perspective from inside a relationship that they can't see. Oh, but how can you complain? You don't have to go to work. You don't have to, he provides everything for you, or she provides everything for you. And that really hurts women's self-confidence.
It's so true. And you know what? I think back to that. If people haven't watched the Maid show on Netflix, I think back to that time when she's sitting in the office of the social care worker, and she says, you need to testify. And she's like, what, you want me to go and sit there and say he didn't hit me? Right. And it's like, yeah. And that's the way it is when you're in a relationship where the early warning signs are there. This, the coercive control, the financial abuse, the controlling behavior, the emotional, the psychological abuse, the gaslighting, all of that is there, but they haven't hit you yet. Maybe it won't ever happen. Who knows? But I do know that, in my situation, all of those things were there, but they haven't hit you. So is it abuse? Right. And that's what a lot of people say. And these kind of people are so good on the outside, looking like such amazing human beings to everybody else. Right. So then when you leave them, people are like, what? I don't understand. I don't understand. So your focus a lot is recognizing in your own pattern that, okay, I was in this relationship. I didn't realize the warning signs. So now your focus is, let's educate people on the warning signs so that they either don't get in or they stop it too early. Cause I remember after I got engaged. So the person that I'm talking about, so I was married for 16 years to my kid's father. So we have 4 kids together. When we got divorced, we're very amicable. We're still really good friends. And then right after our divorce, I fell in love with another man, and I thought I had met my Prince Charming. This guy, I knew he had a rocky past, but there were so many excuses about he had gotten better, and I just totally fell for it. I ended up marrying him because I literally thought okay, he's a changed man. He's great. He's an amazing person, blah, blah, blah. And the wedding night, it was flip a switch. I cried myself to sleep on the bathroom floor. I slept on the bathroom floor crying because I read a poem to his son that he didn't give me permission to read. And he said I was the most selfish and disgusting person he has ever met. And I cried myself to sleep, and I thought I have just made the biggest mistake. But I remember thinking the morning of the wedding, I got to call this off. But then I also remember thinking, but our kids are so excited for this. I remember thinking that in my head. I had this gut feeling of I shouldn't go through with this. But then I also in my head was no, you're just nervous. You're just, you always second guess yourself. And there were so many red flags that I knew at that time. But again, second guessing myself, they make you doubt your own, right? Through gaslighting, they make you doubt your own thought process. So to me, he would say things like, you're just overly emotional. Right? You're just too emotional. He had cheated on me and brought me to therapy so that I could get over it. Yeah. So that was right. So I was in therapy. So I needed to get over the cheating. So, and all of that. So that whole process, it's insanity. And then the financial abuse on top of that, and the future faking, there were so many things, but I didn't even understand what was going on. So much to the point that I took a video of him in a conversation, because when you're with an abusive partner, you go in circles when you're having an argument, and it's so confusing. So I actually took a video because of one of our arguments. It wasn't an argument, more of like a conversation, and him getting mad because I had said I was going out to coffee with a friend, and this friend had guy friends. And he thought that because I was going out to coffee with this friend, that meant I was going to meet up with guys too or something. I took it to my therapist and I laid it and I played it for her. And I said, what's going on? And she's like, you're in an abusive relationship. And I'm like, I am. Like, I had no idea. They
How
have.
did you feel when she said that to you? I'm curious myself.
I felt like I'm not going crazy, because
so it was validation.
Validation. I felt like I was going crazy.
Right.
I felt like I was losing my mind, because
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say, they have a way of twisting you upside down and turning you around, making you doubt your sanity.
Yep.
And here I came into the relationship broken because I had just gone through a divorce. But I, I'm a confident business person, single mom of 4, like good mom, financially stable, own all my own stuff. How the heck did that happen to me? Right. And so if it can happen to me, I feel like it can happen to anybody. But the way that it transpired is so slow, right? Like what you were talking about, these little, the little tests, like, I'm just going to stay over one night. And then all of a sudden they're over every night for like 2 weeks. And then I'm just going to ask you to pay for this one dinner. And then all of a sudden they're like, I can't cover this bill. Can you help me out? Those little tiny things. And I don't think for me, I had to take a video into my therapist and say, what the hell is going on here?
That was actually really smart. That was because so often I see that as being part of that cycle, or that, I don't want to say cycle in the sense of like a domestic abuse cycle, but in that the thoughts in our heads is that we question afterwards. Well, was that just my perspective? Am I over emotional? Am I reading too much into it? And we wish there was a little angel on our head saying, no, you're not overreacting. Yes, you are thinking correctly. Because if you're in that psychological warfare, let's say, of constantly being questioned and then making you question your inner voice, it's really hard to build up your self-confidence again and say, no, that my perspective is not wrong. There is nothing wrong with my perspective. That's how it makes me feel. Whether you intended, which more than likely you intended to make me feel that way, whether or not you intended, that is how I received it. And so in a healthy relationship, we need to talk about, okay, you may not have had that intention, but that's how I received it. So we've got to figure out a way to discuss this better or clear up the misunderstandings in that moment. And I think you said such a key thing that I hear over and over again from women who are like, am I in a bad relationship? Am I in a controlling relationship? Is they are very successful out in the community. They have a business, or they're like a top sales performer, or they're ever well liked. People like them. They're kind, they're caring, they're giving. And what I'm finding is more and more is that's who those manipulation behaviors are attracted to, is because, well, they're successful and so they're driven. So they want to help. They want to figure it out. They want to, oh yeah, I'll help with the bills this month. Okay. Yep. Understand. And I'll take care of, because I am driven. I can provide. And then what happens is, well, suddenly, like you said, it's the slow buildup. And I think society gets confusing depending on how you were raised. What was your childhood like? What was your parents' relationship like? There's many, many studies and research done that our childhood, the things that we've experienced in our childhood, are what forms our adult lives. That's why we see generational issues continue in that cycle, because we don't know. For me and my situation, when I started dating my first husband, I had already made all my plans. I was a planner. I knew exactly where I was going to college. It was going to be across in the neighboring state. I was going to do this and I was going to do that. And therefore, and he was staying home, or where our community. And I grew up with an over-the-road truck driver dad as my father and a mom who was a nurse. So it was absolutely normal to only see my dad on the weekends. When kids who are in divorced, joint custody homes would say, "Oh, I see my dad on the weekends." I was, me too, not realizing there was a difference. So to me, it's, if I don't see you, talk to you, we don't hang out except every once in a while, it doesn't bother me at all.
Right.
So while I was going to school, every weekend he would drive. It was 5 hours round trip on Friday to pick me up and drive 5 hours back on Sunday to drop me off. So I literally spent one weekend, my freshman year, on the college campus.
Wow.
In the dorm, which I look back now and I'm like, oh, I missed out on so much of the social aspect.
Right.
I probably would have seen things sooner, but looking back on it now, I'm like, that's really controlling. Like he was so worried to leave me on campus with my girlfriends that he would make sure I came home.
Yep.
But growing up, that's what you did. You saw your family on the weekend. So there's things that I didn't recognize that as a warning sign because I could justify it with how I was raised. So there, I think, is another piece of talking to women about it, is not telling them, well, that's wrong or this is right, because it's their perspective. It's what they want.
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny you say that, because I had the same thing, because I do a lot of national television, and he would always be like, "Oh my gosh, I want to come with you on that show," and want to travel with me every time I traveled to whatever TV show I was going to. And at first I thought, oh, that's sweet. Like he wants to come and see. But when in reality, he didn't trust me that I wasn't going to like hook up with somebody in the city or go meet somebody else in another city. So it got to the point where I was like, I'm going by myself, and he would freak out. Like he couldn't handle. And I'm like, this is my job. Like I'm going to work and do a television show, and you're not coming with me. Like, that's just the way it is. And he couldn't, it would like erupt every time,
What would he do then while you were gone if he wasn't with you? I think that's important too, talking about that.
I don't know.
So it wasn't like he was texting you?
Oh yeah.
Constantly.
Oh no, he would always be texting me, checking in. What are you doing? What are you doing? Where are you? All the time. Yeah.
Because that's one thing too, that is women who the instant then they do get out for a girls' night, finally, for whatever reason, then it's, well, what are you doing? Why aren't you answering me? And then it's like really ridiculous questions too. I remember one story where it was, "Hey, where is the controller for the PlayStation, whatever?" And she was like, I don't know. I'm going to be home in a couple hours. I'm at happy hour. Can't you just wait? And it wasn't that incessant. And then it started getting threatening to this woman. Well, I'm going to let your dog out and it's winter, and I'm not letting it back in till you come home. And that abuse of pets is another thing to pay attention to.
One thing that happened when I finally kicked him out and I asked him to leave my house, he wouldn't leave the house. The house that I owned.
This is a good thing to talk about.
Yes. That I owned. So he moved into my house that I've owned for like 10 years. And I said, I want a divorce. You need to leave. You need to find someplace else to go, because I don't feel safe around you. Because he had a major blowout, and one of my daughters had seen it, and she freaked out and started yelling at him. And it was horrible. I had told him, you need to leave the house. I don't feel safe. And he refused to leave. And so I went and stayed in a hotel by myself while my kids were at their dad's house. And he kept on saying things like, I don't want to watch your dog anymore. I'm not watching your dog. You need to come home and watch your dog. I'm not watching your dog. I'm like, no, I'm not coming. I'm not going. And then he would start showing up at the hotel where I was at to check on me. And then I couldn't get him to leave. So I took my kids and we moved in with my sister for a couple of weeks, an hour and a half away. And I stayed there until he actually left the house. But then I had to get a restraining order because, and then I think this is an important thing. And this is why I think people stay. This is honestly why I stayed, is because I knew that I was going to be up against. There's this book I read called Prepared to be Tortured. Have you heard of that? Oh, it's so good. It's by Prepare to be tortured. It's about how to date and break up with a narcissist. Okay. And so it's by A.B. Jameson. And it talks about what's going to happen after you leave. And it was spot on. It was, they're going to try and convince everybody that you're crazy, right? Stalk you, harass you, make up lies about you. He told so many people that I was like sleeping with their husbands. I lost all of my best friends. They all turned to his side. His son started harassing my daughter. I had to get a restraining order. I mean, still to this day, I get harassed by his girlfriend, who he moved on with like right after, like days after I kicked him out. And so, yeah, like he got arrested for breaking the restraining order. Like there's a criminal case against him, but I'm crazy. I'm the crazy one. He can spin it around so that I'm the crazy one, right? So me speaking out about this is very healing for me, because I literally hid in my house for a year while he went around town telling everybody that I was crazy. And I'm like, you can tell people I'm crazy. I'm not. I'm healing in my way right now. But it's definitely very triggering for sure. And I think a lot of women have the PTSD diagnosis, which I do. And so not only do, bringing the financial piece in, is that the legal system doesn't understand that the financial abuse doesn't just end when the relationship ends, is that the divorce process is like the final hurrah for them. It's I'm going to really stick it to him this time. And I mean, I have a friend of mine that's been trying to divorce a narcissist for 3 years, because it's like their final control tactic of, I'm going to delay all of my paperwork. I'm going to, not fill it out. I mean, it took my ex 10 months to fill out anything. And, file all of these unnecessary things, take out loans. My ex stole our boat out of storage, wouldn't tell anybody where it was, drove it around. That kind of stuff, like, and the financial abuse doesn't just end like when you say you want to quit. So do you find that like when you're helping people too, that like the divorce, like divorcing people like this, it's like hell?
Because they finally got the courage to leave. And there's I don't know, an expectation, or this vision in their head of, that's the worst part. If I can leave, that's the hardest thing I'm going to have to do. And the reality is, and you don't want to say it, but at the same time, they need to hear it from a reality perspective of say, that is a hard thing. To leave is hard. And there's going to be other hard steps. But the difference is I will be here to support you. I'll help you. You're not going to do it alone. Whereas before in your relationship, you might have felt very alone because you were gaslit. Nobody could see what was going on and people second guessed you. But now I am. And that's where they say, believe victims. And I will say, there's a couple of things you were talking about, imminent domain, moving into your house. That is so huge, because especially during COVID, when there was more, you couldn't, there was no legal police couldn't kick someone out of a house. They couldn't make them homeless during COVID. And so you were screwed, even if the house is in your name, as long as they have bills that show their name with your address, that's all they need. There are so many times that, and my husband is law enforcement. He has said it's heartbreaking. It's frustrating where young women will have their boyfriends move in who aren't helping with the financial. They aren't good. They're not good people for these young women. And the parents get involved. Her parents get involved saying, well, you got to kick him out. And they're like, we can't. Legally, we have no recourse. She should not have, and that's where this educational piece comes in. And your ex had a son, you said, correct? One client that I work with it was really tough because he had a daughter that she was helping take care of, paid for her school, paid for clothes.
Same thing here.
All that stuff.
He moved his son in with us, and I was paying for I was paying for it, taking care of him, like
right
99% of the time. And I had to kick him out too.
And that's tough because this client was saying, this is a younger girl and I've grown attached to her. She's like, I don't have any kids of my own. So this is like my daughter. And because if I kick him out, then her mother is in another state. She will go into child protective services. She's not going to go, like my parents will take her, I'll keep her. And it's like, you have no legal rights. You have no parental rights. Your parents have no. And so then it becomes, and this is where they say, women, it's not so easy as why didn't you just leave? There's all these other things. Like if I do this, then I am putting this young female, this young girl in harm. Who knows where she's going to end up, what foster home. And so women, again, what do? We're going to take care of others. We're going to think of others. We're going to put them first. And that becomes so much part of the burden. Or, hey, we're going to have time. Another woman I worked with never hit. She was never struck. It was all psychological abuse to the point of contracts. He would drop contracts of what they couldn't do. And they had to sign them. And then he would change them. So there was constantly the moving goalpost. So it was the future faking of, well, once we get to this point, then things will be better for 15 years. And the night that she finally got the courage to leave, she had recorded the argument because, again, nobody would believe her if it would have been a he said, she said, and there was no bruising. There was no outward community, was all peaches and cream. Everything's great. And she had in her mind, she said, when I dreamt of finally getting away, I pictured he'd be gone for a long time. He'd be locked up for his behaviors. And it ended up being 48 hours because it was a first-time offense. And so she's like, I went from having no job, making no decisions, not having control of anything. And in 48 hours, I had to move myself and my 2 kids out. I had to find a place for us to live. I couldn't go to my family. That's the first place he would look. And so that too, I mean, in the show Maid, when they're like, well, don't you have someone who can watch your child? And don't you have somewhere you can go? And she's, no, I don't. Yeah. And those lists, and granted, yes, this is a TV show, but I know services are never adequate for the people that need them. So where do they go for help?
If you started 2022 with more debt than you'd like to have, you're not alone. Debt.com is here to help. Whether you still have holiday credit card debt to pay off or student loan payments are starting to build up again. Maybe you even have debt collectors that are hounding you for payments you just can't make. The experts at Debt.com can help. Finally, one website can help you solve your debt problems. Credit cards, back taxes, student loans, medical debt, collections, you name it, Debt.com can help you solve it. And they do it with no judgments. Because they understand that when people end up in debt, it's usually for things outside their control, like job loss or divorce or some other hardship. So if you're in debt, visit laurengrutman.com/debt to get the relief you need. Or call 888-431-2044 to get a free consultation with a debt relief specialist. Find solutions to get out of debt, fix your credit, and get on the path to achieving your financial goals. When life happens, visit Debt.com. So when you're working with somebody and because I found that too. I have many friends that have been in domestic violence shelters, right? And that's a heart of mine. We were talking about that before the show. Like, how do I help with my expertise in finances, help these women? And my dream is to start a non-for-profit to help women get back on their feet financially. And I'm grateful. I feel like every time I go, like, that God allows me to go through a situation, right? So that I can help people. Now, do I wish I didn't have to go through this situation? Like, hell yeah. However, I'm like, okay, God, like apparently I needed to learn this so that I could have a heart connection with this issue so that like now my heart is in there, but the lists, like completely reinventing your life within like 24 hours, like fleeing, I mean, I definitely can relate to that. Like I got a new car, I got a new phone, just in case they were tapped. Cause I knew that he had purchased a tracking device, for a vehicle. So I switched my car out. I don't have any like tracking, I had a bumper sticker on my car. I took that off because then he could tell it was my car, those kind of things. When somebody comes to you in that situation, like how are you helping them kind of get back on track? Like, what are the first steps for somebody that's like listening today and is like, oh my gosh, like I'm hearing my story. How do I get out? What do you do? How do you help people?
And for those listening, you're probably going to be frustrated when I say it depends. It really depends on you. And that's where I come in and say, I can't tell you what to do. What I'm going to do is help walk beside and be a sounding board and have a resource of, okay, you need help with finances. I'm going to refer you. Here you go. This person can help you. Okay, we need to get you set up, school for your kids. There's so many little pieces that are dependent on each individual that I hesitate to put anything out there as a prescription. Oh, just do X, Y, Z and you'll be fine, because it's not going to fit for everyone, for every place that they live. My biggest thing is feeling that support and knowing that you're believed. I had another situation, and this is a finance question that I really wanted to have you answer, is for the longest time, it was the second marriage for both of them, for this couple, and they had separate accounts. Everything was separate. There was no joint accounts. And she was really bothered by that. That was why I have no idea. I don't know what you do with your money. We pay our bills, but can we have one that's a joint savings that we can put for family vacations or whatever? And it was always, nope, I don't have time, put it off. And finally, she had started a savings account for kind of the fun family things. And she got all the paperwork lined up, got him put on the account, hoping it would be a good faith omen of, okay, she added me to this account, I'll add her to my accounts. Never happened. Well, as the relationship continued to deteriorate, suddenly she noticed he was withdrawing money, taking money out. And she panicked because she said, this is my nest egg for leaving. And he has access. And what should she do? What could she do? And I would love to hear your advice in that situation of how do you protect once you've mentally made the decision and you start to plan, which planning is important for better success. How can someone do that without raising a red flag of why did you empty that joint account? If the partner's saying that, why did you empty it?
Right. That's actually a really, really good question, because I can relate a lot to that scenario, because I did the same thing. Like, let's create a joint account, because my money was always our money, but his money was always his money.
Yeah.
Okay. So we did put joint money into a joint savings account at one time, and we bought a boat with that. Right. But doing it in smaller increments, like taking out ATM withdrawals for like $100, I needed to get groceries, and then depositing it into a checking account that is like in a totally different bank that he has no idea that you have.
Okay. So this is for the
nest egg.
The victim or
Yep.
the person who's about to leave is
Correct.
Pull it out randomly a little
Yep.
bit. Okay.
Yep. And then I would completely, or you could just say, hey, you know what? We're not using that account. I think I'm just going to shut it down, and
what about saying, hey, there's a better interest rate in this savings account through Capital One or whatever. I'm not trying to give anybody sponsor call out, but is saying, hey, I found a better deal on return if I put it into this savings. And then can you move a joint account to a one person account?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
So you can, but this is, this, and I know this, that when you're in an abusive relationship, you're always weighing your decision based with what battle you're going to have to fight. Right.
Yes.
So, okay, I'm going to do this, but I know that when I do this, the battle is going to be huge. I'm going to have to deal with being gaslit and yelled at. And one of my big things was, he wanted to go on the deed of my house. And I'm like, you're not going on the deed of my house. Like, I'm not putting you on my mortgage. Well, if you don't put me on the house, the deed of your mortgage, I'm just going to go buy my own house and leave you. And I'm like, okay. Like, that's where I got to. Go get your own house then. Like, what do you want? You're not going on my house. And this was my second marriage. So a therapist, I remember, recommended to me when I went through my first divorce, do not ever, he said, protect your first family above everything else. So the first family is me and my ex-husband, Mark, and my 4 kids. Protect that family. And what that means is, if I pass away, I need to give the money to Mark so he can support the kids. That's always the protection. And so I took that very seriously. So there was no way that I was going to give my kids' childhood home to a guy that I felt like I made a mistake to. So I made that very clear to him. And that always was a problem. And so when I went and refinanced, I knew, I'm like, this is going to cause such a big issue because he's going to try and get in on it, in on the paperwork. And he did. Thankfully, like, the interest rate was like 10% higher, trying to add him to it or something like that, because he had terrible credit. So I like used it that way. Like, I'm not doing it. Like, this is I wanted a lower interest rate, not a higher one. Then it's no point to do it. So in that sense, like, there can be ways, like, it depends on what fight they want. If they want a lower fight, just take out $100 here, $100 there. My guess is they're probably not checking the account balance. So if you can just take $100 out here, say I need groceries, or the kids needed school clothes, and then just transfer it to another bank account slowly. And then, transfer it to another bank, like Capital One or something like that. But then they're going to want to know why they're not on the account. And then you're going to have that battle as well. So again, this is the telltale, this is the sign. Don't give, if you are in an abusive relationship and you are trying to get out, don't give the ex access to your money.
And that's where you talk about, what fight do you want to have? That's to why I keep feeling so passionate about the prevention piece and recognizing early. And because of the boundaries, this is the boundary testing on, well, I want to get on your account. And if I just keep, it's sales training. If you've ever been through sales training, they're like, it's 7 no's to get to a yes. But this is the twisted side of it, where they're just going to keep pushing until you finally are exhausted and say, fine, I'll add you to the account. And that, how can we talk about this? A girlfriend of mine who is divorced for a while now, and it's the whole dating scene. And she had an individual who would just show up, and she'd be like, no, don't come over. Don't show up. And then she'd get home and he'd be sitting in his car at the end of the driveway. Like, well, I just wanted to make sure you were okay. And I was like, that is not okay. That is not okay at all. And in this process, she struggled with, I don't want to be rude. This is a small community. Our kids know each other. And it was like, you're not being rude by enforcing your boundaries. He's being rude by completely disrespecting yours. And having those conversations and those reminders, because when I talk about the impacts of our childhood, and as parents, if you have children, you're hearing all these anti-bullying messages. And I'm not saying that I'm against anti-bullying with little kids, but there has to be that change in conversation of, at one point you can say, you don't have to allow toxicity around you to make someone else comfortable, because that's where the message gets twisted.
Exactly. And I have that conversation. So I have one boy who's a teenager, he's 16. And then I have 3 daughters, 12, 10, and 8. And I'm constantly having those conversations with the girls of like, you don't have to be a nice girl. They saw what happened with my ex, and you don't have to be a nice girl. If a guy is bothering you, you just tell him to, walk on by. Like, we don't have to be nice. And the dating scene is a perfect place to practice this. I will put this disclaimer on it. It's also the perfect place to realize if you're healthy enough to be dating. Because I went into the dating scene and I realized like, whoa, I am not there yet. Like it's a hot mess out there, and I am not, I am not in any way, shape, or form ready to be in a relationship. And it was a good test. And like, are my boundaries good enough? Like I had one guy, third date, show up in my house, just walk on into my house, not even knock. And I was like outside. So I wasn't even in my house. And he just walked in my house. And I'm like, you can't just walk in my house. Like, what if my kids were home? He's like, well, I was coming to pick you up. Like, you just can't, like, I met you twice. You can't just walk in my house. So that was like, that date didn't happen. I was like, you need to leave. So like those kind of boundaries, but thank God for therapy. I mean, that's a huge thing. Like we need to be in therapy if we've been through something like this, right?
Letting go of the stigma of therapy, of mental boundaries. Because a lot of times, again, it doesn't start with the physical. It starts with the mental, the emotional. I'm tired tonight. I've had a long week. It's Friday. I know we said we were going to go out, but I am just exhausted and I need to stay home. And that's really hard. If you've got fear of missing out, if you really, if you're like, oh, I do, but I'm tired. And does that other person respect your mental and emotional boundary of saying, hey, that's cool. How about, we can have breakfast on Sunday if you're feeling more awake or things, not a problem. It's how much does someone respect, and what we can only control ourselves. So you taking the time, individuals taking the time to say, well, where are my emotional boundaries? Where are my mental boundaries? Because those that I will call them the predators are looking for those people who are starved for attention, who are starved for affection. And they will go overboard and the love bombing of, oh my goodness. And then you're like, oh, this is what I've been missing, but you're getting it from someone else. And that's what you have to pay attention to is, yes, it's absolutely fine to be adored. Yes, you want to feel heard. Yes, you want to feel like someone's really paying attention and cares about you, and making sure you're in a mental space where you're already giving yourself that. Hey, I am okay who I am. I am just fine by myself. Yes, I can date. Yes, I want to meet people. And you deciding where that is. So I think what you said is brilliant of making sure you're in a good place for enforcing your boundaries.
I was not in a good place when I got into the relationship with him in the first place. And one thing I wanted to point out too is that I've talked to a couple other women. And one of the things I think that was so hard for me to come to terms with was, this was my second marriage. How embarrassing it was. I'm just going to put that out there. It was so embarrassing to be like, oh crap, I got married and it didn't work out again, And then I have two sisters. And when I was doing the dating thing and on the dating apps, they would say to me, like, look out for the red flags. And I'm like, I am a red flag. Like, I am a red flag. Like I've been married twice. Like that conversation is something that's going to have to come up if I'm ever with somebody. And that is incredibly, in my mind, a lot of times I stayed in it like, okay, I don't want to be divorced again. I didn't get into this to be divorced again. I've got to do everything I can to figure this out and to work on it and go to therapy and do this and change myself and work on myself. But that whole process kept me stuck in an abusive relationship. And it was like, once I realized that nothing was ever going to change, like, what am I going to stay in another relationship for 15 years and just continue to be abused? Like, make my kids live through that? No, like, do you find that in your work that there's women that are on their second, third marriages that are stuck in that because it's just like hell? It's so embarrassing.
This is cracking me up. And I feel like you can put a disclaimer on here, like never before
Right.
said out loud, secrets that you've never heard is
Right.
I'm on my third marriage.
Okay.
So after that very brief 5-month first marriage, where my piss and vinegar was like, I'm not going to put up with this. Right. And I'm out. I was raised in a very Catholic family.
Okay.
So
I was raised in like a super Christian family. So you don't get divorced.
Yep. No. I mean, you better be beaten to a pulp before you leave, was the attitude. Now, that was my perspective. My parents might say something different now. But I got into a bad, I shouldn't say bad. It was an immature, I am, too much alcohol, too much partying. I don't want any responsibility, like rebellion from this marriage that I had gotten out of, relationship, realized it was wrong, moved away, far, far away, to say, I need a fresh start where no one knows my history. I come from a small community. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows your past.
Right.
Ugh. And so I moved away, met someone out there. Everything seemed wonderful and fine, and moved back here to where I kind of grew up, because all of my family was there, and I wanted to be around my family. And that relationship, great guy, but there was some addiction, abuse in that relationship. And we didn't have kids, but it was, oh my gosh, is this going to be my life? Like, I don't want to have kids with this person, and I really want to have kids. And that shame and that judgment, it did obviously end in divorce. And I mean, I lived 10 miles from my parents' house, and he moved out beginning of November. And so it was right at the beginning of winter. Not once did and again, my dad's gone a lot, but my mom and I have always struggled, but she never called, it was like I didn't exist. And so it was me by myself, very financially strapped. I mean, I was resourceful in the sense of, okay, well, I can make this work. I have a job. I can pay the mortgage, pay my car payments, but there's not much left over afterwards. But that shame was so tough, because when I started dating my now husband, the thing I was like, listen, there's no filter. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think. And here's all my stuff. And if you think you want to go on a date with me, okay, but I'm probably never getting married again. Like, it was very much like, here I am. And he was divorced or had gotten out of it. He didn't have kids either, but that's one thing for us. I giggle all the time. We just had our 11th anniversary this past weekend. Thank you. And I'm like, honey, the odds were way stacked against us. Just so you know, another year beating the odds, honey. And we went to a therapist when we were even considering it. Cause again, I was like, I never want to get married again, ever. And he's
that's
like,
where I'm at. I'm like, I'm
yep.
good. I'm good being by myself.
And he was like, well, I want to have kids, and I want that family. That's something that I've always had vision for. I'm like, I do want kids. I just don't want the marriage. And so what was great though, is he didn't push. It was like, okay, this is what I want. This is what you want. We're fine right now. And then eventually it did. And so then I was like, we're going to a counselor.
Yep.
I'm
not failing again.
No. And it was funny because the counselor was great. It was a gentleman, and he's like, hey, Kellye, describe your vision for what a relationship with kids looks like. And then he asked my husband, no, you describe it. And for me, I'm like all chaos. The dogs are barking, the dinner's boiling over on the stove, kids are running around, it's loud, it's whatever. And my husband has a chaotic job. So he was like, my home is my sanctuary. It's where I come to recharge and rest. And this counselor was like, you two should never get married. And he started, he's like, and he started laughing, and he said, here's the thing, write your own story, do it your way. Don't let society tell you what your family needs to look like. And that's really worked for us. And it's not that we haven't struggled. Oh my gosh, no, we're two very strong, stubborn individuals, but I've never once felt like I couldn't be me. I've never once felt like maybe that he didn't understand me, or didn't understand why I wanted a goal or needed wanted to follow my passion, but it was never that I couldn't be me.
Right.
But and it's funny because you're like, oh, she's been divorced 3 times or married 3 times. My mom made this comment to me, and I cracked up. she was like, oh, this lady, and she's been married 3 times. So she's crazy. And I was like, Mom, I've been married 3 times. She goes, well, not you. And I'm like, you don't know people's stories.
You don't. And that's why, like, when I was coming up with the name of the show, Hard Money Talks, it's like, okay, we've got to like start talking about and unstigmatizing these kind of conversations, because I remember 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, like I would have thought, oh, she's been married twice. Like there's something wrong with
Elizabeth
her.
Taylor, like, here I come.
Right. Like, but these kind of conversations are so like crucial to have. And we have to wrap up. And I wish we didn't have to, because we could just stay here like all day, I feel like. But I feel like you really helped me. And I think helped a lot of the listeners here, like be able to recognize some of the early warning signs of this. And then what can we do? How can you help people? Because I want to like lead people to you so that you can help walk along them. Because I know one of the things that really helped me is I called my local like safe organization hotline. They have like free counseling, and like that really helped me validate. And then having my own therapist, and I still have that video clip on my phone. And you know what? I saved it in like 10 other places just in case he tried to delete it on me. So I have it in like multiple locations saved, because if I ever doubted myself again, I needed to listen to it, And so every once in a while I'll go back and I'll be like, yes, Lauren, it was true. So how can people like get in touch with you, and what are some of the services that you can help people with?
Yep. So people can find me. My website is thediamondarrowgroup.com.
Okay. And we'll link all the links in the show notes.
Yeah. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. I definitely say follow those pages because I put out content.
That's how I found you. I found you on Instagram.
Yeah.
On Instagram. So, that's how I was like, I need to have her on the show.
Yeah. Well, awesome.
Yeah.
No, when I try and put stuff out that says, this is not victim blaming. This is what would you do in these situations? Or here's things to think about before you find yourself in a situation. And really women, I do one-on-one coaching for women who either maybe have a specific threat, like a stalker, or they are getting out of a relationship and they need some guidance or they need to reaffirm. I also do classes. I focus again on the prevention side of things. When people say you need to be more aware of your surroundings, what am I looking for? And what behaviors am I watching for? So that's where I geek out and I have fun, but then I partner with physical self-defense instructors. So it's a very robust, complete self-defense class. And then I'm like I said, my book's coming out February of 2022. I'm doing a big launch event on International Women's Day. We're going to have fun. We're going to talk about it's being okay with ourselves. And I hate to be the motivational or, rah, but there really is something where women, we need that validation and we need that we're not crazy. Yeah. And anytime now that I see someone, the saying goes, if I see someone who I've heard or people have described as, oh, she's crazy, she's been married 3 times, I'm like, I want to know more.
I want to be her friend.
She's probably overcome something really big that she's ashamed of and doesn't want to tell anyone about. And
it's so true. And I think to myself too, I want to be her friend.
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
no, she's good.
I want to know what hell she's been through.
Right. Well, thank you for having me on the show. And yeah, any future topics that come up, I would love to come back on and hash them out, because I agree. The more we talk about the realities, the more we talk about how it starts, the sooner we can reach high school age, college age, so that they're getting past that. You don't have to agree with everyone. You don't have to be kind. You can be direct, you can be firm, and you don't have to apologize.
Right. And you can be badass and you can be strong, and you don't have to deal with these guys with very little insecurity, because you're worth more.
Yes.
So thank you so much. This was like so fun and so enlightening. And I know that the more we talk about this, the more that we can help other women and help them come out of that shame, which I know was hard for me to come out of. So I appreciate you being authentic and bold as well. So thank you so much. Thank you guys for tuning into the episode. That was awesome. I don't know about you, but I really felt her heart for the topic, but also the love. I love bringing on guests that are able to fully share their story without shame, because that's so important to me as well. So we all have a story, we all have a past, we all have a future. And the fact that she's able to use her experience to help others. So I've left all of the links that she talked about. I've left Kellye's website and resources in the show notes. So you can go to laurengroupman.com/podcast and you can find all of the show notes to all of the episodes that I do. But, anytime you want, I'd love any reviews of the show. If you can subscribe, review, anything like that, it always blesses me. But these hard money talks are so important, because if we never deal with the root of why we're struggling with our money, we're never going to be able to be successful with our finances in the future. So thank you for joining me again for another weekly episode, and I will see you next week. Bye.